Hello humans, my name is Dael Kingsmill, and lately I've been seeing a lot of questions cropping up on Reddit and all sorts of places online about how you should handle overland travel in D&D. And since I devised my own system of overland travel, I thought I would share it with you. So you can take it, you can leave it, do with it what you will. So let's do this. D&D. Let's go. The party that I run for has a ranger, Kylerin the elf, which in my estimations makes it really important to kind of make overland travel a significant thing. No one from my adventuring group watch this. You turn this off right now, I see you. Fair warning, it is a bunch of extra work to prep before a session. So if you don't have a ranger or you don't want to do a bunch of extra work, then maybe you shouldn't. Random encounter tables exist, or even better in my opinion, just do a montage of the travel and skip over it. Which personally is how I would handle repeated trips of the same area to be traversed anyway. Hey, player one, what was a single problem that you encountered on this trip? Player 2, how did you solve that problem? Player 3, what consequence did y'all endure? I'll put a link to an article that describes that better. But yeah, basically if you don't want to put in the extra work, then don't bother with overland travel at all. But if you're me, and you just gotta get it right, here's the way I do it. So this began kind of based on the Angry GM's system of overland travel, but by the end looks nothing like it. So, you know, extra reading if you want it. There's an article to the Angry GM and how he does overland travel. But as for me, this is my super organized DM binder. Ooh la la! Lots of things! The basic gist of what we're trying to do with this is make sure that travel is interesting by including constant choices and constant risk. It can't just be constant risk if you want to actually make it interesting. That's why random encounter tables never seem to do the trick. Because it's like, sure, there's a risk of getting hurt, but then it's like, there's no interesting consequences if it doesn't come from a character choice. So choice number 1, big choice for the players, what path are they gonna take? I'm gonna put up a map, an example map here. This is an upcoming trip that my party are gonna be making from the small swamp town of Glasstide to the bigger city of Brynolden. Once they're out of the swamp, they're going to have a choice of being able to cut across through the hills to get to Brynolden, or to go around via the road. The road, as is almost always the case, takes longer but is safer, while the hills are faster but more dangerous. For anyone who's about to ask me in the comments, I drew the map myself I sketched it and then I put it in Photoshop and then I put a hex grid over top. I'm sorry there's no magic map program. I'm sorry. So that's a choice that they have to make. Do we take the faster but more dangerous path, or do we take the slower but safer path, the literal path in that case? And they can change their mind partway through. They can start in the hills and get almost murdered and change their minds and go and find the road, if they can find the road. Decision 2, the party has to elect a provisioner, a navigator, and a scout. The provisioner will spend their energy during the day trying to forage for food in order to feed as many people as possible without dipping into provisions. The navigator is going to make a check at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, depending on how you want to run it, to see whether the group get lost or not. This can be more or less difficult depending on the terrain and the weather and things like that. For example, if the group is following a road, the navigation check is more or less pointless because they're following a road. And the scout can make checks throughout the day to see if they spy any danger on the horizon. All 3 very important tasks. Also important in making these choices when electing from the party members is to note that anyone who is acting as provisioner, navigator, or scout is spending more energy during the day than the other party members. And so personally, I rule that they don't get the effects of a long rest if they also take a watch that night. And finally, enter the hand of fate. Because we all want there to be an element of chance, we all want to roll the bones and see what happens. What I do is I make a stack of cards, in this case, so here's my example again. In this case, I know that the party's gonna be traveling for about 4 days, maybe more if they get lost. And so I've prepared for up to 12 days of different events that can happen, and I've broken them up into morning, noon, afternoon, evening, midnight, and pre-dawn. All 4-hour lots. So 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., so on and so forth. Additionally, I added in days that are specific to traveling on the road or traveling in the hills. Depending on whether they're traveling on the road or traveling in the hills, if they've rolled that number, you pick that specific version of the day. And the idea of the events you put together is that they aren't necessarily all dramatic or all bad things. On some days, nothing in particular happens. Especially if they're traveling on the road, there's a much higher chance that they'll encounter days where nothing too dramatic happens. But a lot of the events are designed to just force more decisions. So for example, on day 10, nothing bad happens technically, but a dog does take a liking to one of the party members while they're in their travels, and it just kind of wanders around trying to play with them all day. In the evening when they all sit down to eat, it wants to eat some of their jerky rations, so they have to make a decision whether or not to feed the dog some of their rations, which has its own little consequence. And then later on while they're sleeping, the dog comes and it's licking their face and it wakes them up, so it deprives them of that long rest. So even though nothing bad happens, you've still got that little bit of a consequence of like, ooh, are they gonna have the resources in case something big does happen the next day? So, as an example, I asked y'all on Twitter for some D12 rolls. So just for some context, in this scenario, the party is escorting a group of nomadic merchants, and let's say that they took the road and it's gonna take 4 days. All right. Okay, so we got a 12, first of all. Let's see what day number 12 holds. Thank you for that, Sydney Nowaski. Party sets off as normal, so nothing particularly important happens in the morning. You still want to describe some of the events in the morning, just ordinary things to give that flavor and feel the passage of time. At noon, we have noted that the group takes advantage of the perfect weather and the breezy day to keep on walking for longer than they would. So in the afternoon, they take a later break than usual, and 2 of the PCs, the party can choose who, take the time to get in a little sparring practice. Whichever of the party members makes the most sense breaks a strap on their armor. I threw in that little caveat because, you know, if you've got a monk in your party and they're not wearing any armor, it's going to be hard for them to break it. So a strap on the armor breaks and they suffer a penalty to their armor class until they can find someone to repair it. So that's a really harsh thing to get on day 1, but it creates some interesting tension. Later in the evening, they make camp. At midnight, a rabid dog approaches the camp, but it's easily scared off, so again, there's going to be interesting choices to be made there. If something does approach the camp, it might not actually fight them, so then the party member who's on watch, if they have someone on watch, has to decide, is it worth waking up the other party members and potentially ruining their long rest? Day 2 from Eric Barkman is day 2. What's day 2? This specifically notes, and this is something that I think is standard for most of the days, if their sleep was interrupted, the party only benefits from a short rest, or if they explicitly pursue the long rest again, they get a later start in the day, but they get the effects of a long rest. By noon, when they stop for a break around midday, they take the time to watch some of the broken up storm clouds and note their fluffiness and pick out shapes. In the afternoon, one of the PCs gets a rock in their shoe as they travel. In the evening, they set up camp. At midnight, nothing of note happens. In the pre-dawn, something approaches, but it turns out to be a herd of wild horses. And we got day 11 from CC Ryburn. Ugh! Yes. In the morning, they wake up with food poisoning from the cooking the previous evening. If you'd like to, you can ask them before revealing this who did the cooking the night before, and watch them take all the blame for your devious decisions. By noon, they've lost half the day to throwing up and feeling sick, which is something that you're going to want to note in their travel time, so it takes a little longer for them to travel. I personally would have anything that delays them creates an extra half a day of travel, so it wouldn't really impact anything mechanically until you get 2 delays or 4 delays, you know what I'm saying? In the afternoon, they notice vultures watching who think they're not going to last long and circle overhead waiting for them to settle. In the evening, they set camp, and for the midnight area, which remember starts at 10 p.m. As soon as the party is settled and mostly sleeping, the vultures land and begin to pester and swoop until chased off. In the pre-dawn, nothing of note happens. So that's an extra half a day that's been added to travel thus far. So just make a note of that. Let's see what's going on. That was day 3, so day 4. Joe Donnelly has sent me a video of him rolling dice.
Because, of course, I'm going to pull out every D12 I have, because you said you needed a couple of random rolls. So here we go.
Ooh, what did we get? I'm gonna pick the prettiest dice. Ooh, that 7 was nice. The 7 and the 4, they're pretty. I'm gonna go with the 4. What's number 4? 4, we have a divide road only, hills only. 4 for road only is that in the morning, as they begin to move, a shepherd moving his flock joins the road ahead of the party, and so they walk surrounded by sheep. By noon, the flock begins to attract wild dog predators. The scout may see the pack gathering in the surrounding hills, otherwise a surprise attack occurs on the flock. In the afternoon, if the pack members escape without a lamb, they'll fall back and follow the shepherd rather than the party. So in the evening, if the party takes the time to protect the shepherd and his flock, the party will need to set camp appropriately. Around midnight, the wild dogs are hunting, and the party may have to protect the flock, and at the pre-dawn, the wild dogs finally move on to other weaker targets. Now, potentially, if they are diverted from their course to go and protect the shepherd, maybe you would say that that adds an extra delay of a half a day to their travel, so you'd add another day on. Otherwise, you might say, no, they arrive partway through the following day at Brynolden. I personally like to pick sort of thematic potential combats to go along with the travel. So the main enemies I've cooked up for this overland adventure are wild dogs and bandits, but there are a couple of encounters that are more rare or more deadly, and the chances of them being encountered is much higher in the hills. So for example, somewhere in there I have an encounter where the party might accidentally set up camp near some burial cairns, in which case the restless dead will be wandering around all night, and if the party calls attention to itself, the spirits will be angered. And make sure to not just think of combat encounters as well. Things that deprive of sleep, like bats coming in the night. Or for example, one of the days that I've set up here is one of the nomad children suddenly falling ill, and they have to make a choice of whether to leg it to the city or sort of set up and just wait out the fever. All about them interesting choices, yo! I'm so cool. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful to some people somewhere. I hope it helped you. This next episode of Critical Role looks like it's going to be a little bit of overland travel. So I'm kind of excited to see how Matt Mercer does it for low-level party members, characters, things. Let me know in the comments below some of the exciting D&D adventures you've been having recently. I have been deprived and I need to live vicariously through you. Apart from that, I do believe that's it. I'm done. Email this to your grandma and I will see you some other time. Damn, it is hot today.